Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. Today we're going to look at impacts of cultural diffusion on Latin America. I did some research looking over all the resources and, well, not all the resources in the world, but all the resources that we provided you. And I kind of figured out how I would kind of think of what the impact of cultural diffusion in Latin America is. So at the end of the video, I'll kind of talk about my opinion, but I'm going to kind of present some of that information first. So about 12,000 years ago, according to the book I read on TrueFlix called South America, it's traced back civilizations in like South and Central America, which today is called, a lot of people refer to that as Latin America. I'll talk about why we call that Latin America later on. But 12,000 years ago, you have native cultures developing here from people that had migrated to this area and started civilizations. We have records up to about 12,000 years ago. Then, about only 500 years ago, so think of just the difference between 12,000 and 500. So in the last 500 years or so, people from Europe were looking to find a better trade route, and they found the Americas over here, and they started to basically like use them for economic gain. So they came over and started using them for economic gain. Also, eventually, they began bringing slaves over from Africa to help with that economic gain. In addition, when they came over, they brought over with them diseases, and that was probably the worst part of it all, because diseases seem to have killed off more of the natives that were in South America than anything else. And that's kind of where it gets the name Latin America, that I'll probably refer to it as Latin America from now on. And I got this from the Latin American culture document that I had to read. And so it's called Latin America because of the connection to the French and the Spanish and the Portuguese languages and the people from, this is supposed to be Spain, but in Portugal up here, from here, because they trace their languages back to Latin. So it's called Latin America based on what's happened in the last 500 years, not based on the, about 11,000 years before that. So you have 11,000 years prior to this, so it's a little bit strange. So not only did they bring over disease, but they actually brought over, which currently is the most dominant religion, and that's what I put the cross here as like a Christian symbol. Christianity, specifically Catholicism and Catholics, seem to be, what I've learned, is the dominant religion in South America or Latin America today. And the reasoning for that is because when the Europeans came over, they brought over Catholic missionaries who taught the natives that religion. But in addition, they continued to grow their population because they came over and essentially killed off a lot of the natives with their diseases and any fighting that we've learned about in previous weeks. But also they brought over their religion. And since this religion stands today, I thought this was important to say, this is a piece of their culture that, is religion, usually isn't a bad thing. It still exists today. So I kind of put that in here as something that came over from Europe and has kind of put in its place in Latin America. So with this, I want to focus on the disease, and not just in the 500 years ago, which can seem like a long time ago, unless you compare it to 12,000, but 50 years ago, the Pater Suri, I think I'm saying that correctly, that this is a native people and indigenous people of the Amazon rainforest. They came into contact with people in 1969, 50 years ago. And it said that they had about 5,000 people. That went down to 250. And it says today they have 1,500. So they haven't recovered from 50 years ago to their population today. Luckily, they survived. But this is kind of probably what happened with a lot of the indigenous people in South America. Now, the Google Earth resource on this was clearly trying to get me to think positively about conservation and preserving the rainforest and global warming, like carbon energy credits and everything. It was very giving me that information. So when you look at that Google Earth presentation, I thought it was interesting. But just based on the name of it, I felt that it could have been some biased information. But I kind of felt like that was the big thing. They brought over the diseases from Europe and ended up killing off a lot of the natives. Now, that doesn't mean to say that everything that has occurred in Latin America is bad, because we have their music, dance, and art if you read the articles about the music and the dance, those are pretty cool things. I think people appreciate, music, dances are fun, nice things. But overwhelmingly, it seems like Latin America is a good name to represent their culture because it's mainly the Europeans who won the battle, so to speak, and took over and kind of pushed their culture on top of everything, with a little bit of the indigenous and ancient cultures still there. And that's kind of where I wrote my claim, evidence, reasoning. So my claim was that cultural diffusion has almost erased 12,000 years of culture in quote unquote Latin America, right? I'm saying that the cultural diffusion has basically erased that, or almost, because we see that there is still some indigenous people and they do still celebrate many of their traditions. When you compare 500 years to 12,000 years, like, you have a lot of time that culture developing. Now, we don't know the full history, so who knows what else happened in that area, right? So, but that's my claim that I came up with. Cultural diffusion has almost erased. What was the effect? It's almost erased 12,000 years of culture in quote-unquote Latin America. Now, my reasoning is mainly to the disease. The disease has wiped out and killed a lot of the native people. So because of that, they no longer are there. And so you lose a lot of the culture when you have a large number of people who have died due to disease. Catholicism and Christianity has come in and replaced any religions that they had. They gained new religions when the Europeans brought their religions with them. In addition, their languages. A lot of the native languages, if you look at the language document, the dominant languages are Spanish and Portuguese in Latin America. The languages there are all Latin-based. They come from Europe. So you have the languages coming from Europe. The Catholicism, Christianity, their language and religion is coming from Europe, and those are big pieces of their culture, which shows that the cultural diffusion coming in from Europe has almost destroyed the original culture that was there. In addition, I'm not really mentioning it, but the African cultures did come in and mix. So you do have some mixture of like the ancient culture with the African culture, with the European culture. But I got the overwhelming idea that the European cultures tend to be the dominant forces there, with the Spanish, Portuguese language and the Catholicism. In addition, the disease killed off a lot of people. It wasn't an intentional thing that they did, just kind of an accidental piece that happened. So this is my evidence, and I've explained to you the reasoning behind how it works, just so you can see my opinion on how cultural diffusion has impacted Latin America.